Hello, and welcome to the Long Ways podcast. I'm Devin Windlespecht.
And I'm Mike Windlespecht.
And we're a father-son duo who is on a journey to hike the great long trails of the world. Last we left off, we were talking about our first day on the trail of the Tour du Mont Blanc, our first time ever hiking these long ways around the world. The last episode, we talked about what it's like to hit the trail for the first time, what it's like for two people who had never really hiked before, and the challenges they face on the first day of the trail, and why we do this. But this episode, I want to talk about what a really good day on the trail is like. Those days where everything seems to go right, everything seems to be going exactly the way you planned and envisioned in your mind, and those days that really make the hike worth it. So where I want to take you is 5 days down the trail at the beginning of our fifth morning on the Tour du Mont Blanc. This part of the trail starts at Lac des Champs. It's in Switzerland. We had just kind of crossed over from Italy to Switzerland at this point, about 2/3 of the way on our trek. This route took us through what I would consider some of the prettiest parts of the trail. Now, you're starting on down by this beautiful, pristine alpine lake down at the bottom of this valley. And as over about 15 kilometers of this section of the trail, you start to go up these absolutely gorgeous little alpine meadows up the Swiss Alps as you're following kind of a 4x4 Jeep trail up the side of the mountain. Following that, you kind of come to the top of this ridge, and at the top of the ridge, you have a view of the entire Rhone Valley behind you, with the little Swiss towns kind of dotted within them. From there, the trail kind of continues to climb upwards. So you're above the tree line. And above the tree line, you reach the Alpe Bovine. Now, the Alpe Bovine, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later, is a tiny little hamlet almost, where it's a cow pasture and a cheese making place, actually, if I remember right, a dairy farm. And from there, you sit there with a beer, and then you follow the trail slowly and gradually down through the pines, down to the little town of Trion in Switzerland, population 150. Now, this was a really easy hike for us, actually. And it was easy not because it wasn't a challenging hike, but because in a lot of ways we had kind of set into a routine during this part of the trip. Dad, you want to talk to me about like how that routine after 5 days of hiking? It's a routine we've kind of set into ever since on our other hikes. But what does that routine kind of look like, from when we wake up in the morning?
Yeah, I think that I don't think we ever really talked about this. We just kind of fell into it. It became the way we could put up with each other. I mean, the problem is by this time we're sleeping in rooms which are, they said they're double occupancy, but they're obviously, double close occupancy.
Yeah,
even with two single beds, it wasn't, and if you're a restless sleeper, it was challenging. But basically what we did is we got up in the morning and went downstairs, not always together, and had breakfast. Devin is one of these type of people who rushes right before the last possible moment, to run down the stairs. And I'm an anxious person who has to be down there when they say breakfast is ready. Mm-hmm. Most of these places did not have lunch stops. And what was interesting, and I would highly recommend it, is, and we can talk about lunches too, but we would just go to one of these little local stores, Devin would, and we would just get a baguette, some cheese, a couple apples. Obviously water was not really a problem for most parts on the tour, which was nice. And then we kind of head out, and usually we kind of, hike alongside of each other for a while. And then Devin's, we've mentioned this before, he's a much faster hiker than I am. And he likes the faster pace. And we kind of would start to separate ourselves. And as we'd hike, he'd get a little bit ahead of me, and he'd stop every 45 minutes and wait up for us. And we always had this signaling thing by which he'd look back and raise his
pole. Yeah.
Raise his pole up in the air, and I raised my pole up in the air. And I don't know how that became the international symbol for I'm not dead.
Well, the interesting thing I remember about this also is that, yes, I would hike ahead of you, but we seemed to set into this pace where I was always only about maybe 10 to 15 minutes ahead of you at one point.
Yeah. It was never more than that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then we kind of like set a pace. And unless you're kind of like doing the hard ascents which usually are at the beginning of the day when you're kind of climbing up out of
Yep.
the valleys, up along to get to the ridge line. We would probably stop maybe every hour to hour and a half, depending on our fitness level.
Yeah. And I think by that fifth day, we kind of, we were beginning to feel, we knew what to expect from each day. And I think that's it. The first couple of days, you're almost preoccupied with, how many miles is going to be, how many, and then by the fifth day, you're saying to yourself, well, I'm going to hike until I get there. That becomes your mindset. I'm just going to hike and then we're going to get there. So, you have an idea of when that should be in the afternoon, but I don't know, it kind of made it a little bit more timeless. And it was nice because then you could kind of proceed at your own pace and, enjoy whatever you wanted to listen to, birds in the forest, the water. And this carries through for all of our hikes because every one of our topographies was completely different from Scotland and Ireland and Mont Blanc. Yeah. So it was nice routine. Okay. And that trail, it was a beautiful morning. It was actually a beautiful, we had good weather almost the entire time we were there,
Yeah.
but this was truly, it was not hot. It was not really windy, which can be a problem if you hit the saddles because it gets cold then. Wind off of glaciers, who would have thought would have been cold. But yeah, so I was really happy with that day. It was a nice pace. I felt good. We had a good night's sleep. We had a good breakfast. We had some food with us and off we went.
So yeah, that's what I kind of want to ask you though. Like when we were both talking about like what was some of our favorite days on the trail, and we came up with a couple from Ireland and a couple from Scotland, but really this day stood out to us as one of the best days like of all of our hikes so far. And I guess the reason I want to ask you, Dad, is what particularly about this day stood out to you, and how does that help us kind of understand what makes a great day on a hike?
Well, I think that the issue is I just didn't have any expectations of it. I was focused not on getting somewhere, but being on the trail, and it took a couple of days to kind of settled into that. But also, this was beautiful. You had this beautiful mountain behind you, and we've just spent a day in Switzerland, a country I actually never even been to, and I spent a lot of time in Europe. The other part was that it was just very relaxing. It was not a grueling ascent compared to many of the ones we had been on, where you wake up in the morning, you walk out and you look up and you go, oh crap.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going up.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. But I think really what it was for me was just having a good pace and really enjoying the day. And things kept changing as we go through these different forests and, past these small houses and stuff. And then, of course, in a little bit, we'll talk about Alpe Bovine, which was absolutely unbelievable for so many ways. And then coming down to Trion, which was one of my favorite, what I always viewed a picturesque Alps town to look like. And it wasn't even a town. It was like, we'll get to that, I'm sure, but it was just really small and just absolutely beautiful with everything around it. The beauty of the mountains was beginning to really settle into me.
Mm-hmm. I think we were also kind of at this point now, especially when we got into Switzerland, where you're really hitting like this more rural, more isolated part of the mountains. In France, there was a lot of ski lodges and small towns, and that was fine. But kind of really being up there in the mountains, I think, besides like one or two stops, not really seeing anyone else besides the fellow hikers around you, is also kind of a really nice experience because it really gets you up there in the mountain air. You feel like you're kind of like on top of the world. If you're seeing other towns, they're far in the valley below you. Those are some of my favorite moments personally. But I also think like when we talked about this between the two of us, Dad, the thing that we keep coming to is that this moment in what was it called? The La Bovine.
Yep.
The dairy farm at the very top of the mountain as being one of our favorite times in the trips.
It was great. Yeah.
So Dad had kind of an interesting experience coming to La Bovine, if he wants to explain that.
I will. So, I had fallen behind Devin, and you're kind of doing not really like switchbacks, but you're kind of following this ridge line. So you imagine you're coming out along the edge of the cliffs and you're coming back in, and we knew we're heading to Alpe Bovine, and we knew this was going to be one of these stops where we could probably stop, definitely get water. Okay. At any of these locations, but this one also was supposed to have a little cafe on it. So it was like, okay, we had bought some lunch that day, but we decided we'd go ahead and get something there too, if we wanted to. And so Devin was ahead of me. I don't know, Devin, but quarter, maybe half mile, not that much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't that far, but it was far enough so I couldn't see him come around. So I'm just kind of walking around and there's really nothing there. I mean, it was obviously cow pasture. And I turned this corner and in the distance, I just see my son standing there, okay, on the trail. And the trail's getting narrow now with this, like imagine an upslope and a downslope. And the trail's kind of like cutting along these, not ridges, but decent hillsides. And so I'm hiking along and he's not moving very much.
No.
So I'm walking along and I kind of like raise my I'm sorry, my
pole.
My pole, sorry, to him. And he kind of turns and waves back at me. And I'm like, huh. And I walk over, and as I'm getting closer, I'm about 100 yards away. I realize that Devin is in a standoff with a bull.
Not a cow, a bull.
A bull.
Horns and everything.
And basically what the bull is doing is standing in the middle of the trail, staring at Devin. And his look is, I'm not moving.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here as
and we can't go up or down.
Nope.
Right?
All of a sudden, I feel like I'm a matador in like a Hemingway novel. But usually those ones die in the Hemingway novels. And that was what was going through my mind at the time.
But the bull wasn't being aggressive. He was just like, I'm on the trail.
Yeah, just completely blocking the way the entire time. You even had like a couple of hikers kind of like from behind kind of like look at you like, is this going to be all right?
Yeah, who's going to move past? And I don't know how long this standoff lasts, but eventually I catch up to you.
Yeah,
right? And, okay,
he's sitting right there beside me.
And being the good father I am, I don't come right up to him because there would be two people by the bull. I stand back a little bit and offer him words of encouragement, like go past him.
Exactly. I think eventually the bull just got bored of me, but I don't know how much time passed because I was locked eyes with a giant bull with horns the size of my forearm staring at me.
And once again, he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't like trying to protect anything.
It may not seem aggressive to you. I saw hate in those eyes. I saw fury.
Okay, well, I was standing behind you, so I wasn't aggressive either. So I wasn't brave. Okay, I figured if he went after you, I could get past. Just the way it works.
Thanks, Dad. I think eventually the bull just wandered off.
He did. Yep. He headed down this path, and we walk into what is Alp Bovine, right? I mean, which was. I want to describe this real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for
because
it.
You think about this. This is basically, these are people who are, they're cow farmers. Sometimes they're sheep up there, depending on what they're doing. Okay, and they're transient. So these are areas that are not occupied. They don't live there all year. They basically set up shop. And to supplement their income, they basically have these small cafes. So imagine you have basically, and it's not primitive, but a stone style house, okay, up there that they're living out of for, 3 or 4 months before they head back down into the valleys.
You see these stone style houses kind of around at the top, but they're not like built up. They're like almost like built into the mountain.
Yes.
So you get that insulation from like I would say half of it is actually underground because it kind of like you step down into it.
Yeah. And this one was surrounded by a fence, okay, which you would go through. And they had this really beautiful little cafe there. And in the corner was one of the water troughs. We told you about those before. They're basically places where you can go get water easily. And you're surrounded by these cows, okay? And you walk inside, and they basically had food, small sandwiches, soda, beer, which was nice. Yep. Okay, one. But this is what's really interesting. There's no road up there.
No.
So you ask yourself, and you try to figure out, how are they resupplied? Okay, they're resupplied by helicopter.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. I mean, imagine that. I mean, you've got this cafe, and it was so simple. And I can't remember what we had. I know we had some cheeses.
We bought some cheese from them. But I remember specifically just sitting up there, and we don't typically take long lunches.
No.
One of the reasons, actually, if you've done these long hikes before, is that actually sitting down for an hour after hiking all day, that's when the tiredness sits in.
Yep.
And having the opportunity to, usually we'll sit down maybe for like 30 minutes and then we're up again because like you want to keep moving, keep the blood flowing.
We weren't always hungry. I mean, you would think you'd be starving, but we would snack pretty regularly throughout the morning. It wasn't like we were starving. We had to get there and it was lunchtime. We hadn't eaten since breakfast. We had a good breakfast. We would always have apples, a little bit of cheese, right? Yep. Some bread, and we would stop and just, trail mix, just snack on that a little bit at a break. So it wasn't like you were starving. You were, but this was different. This was a nice place. This was one of my favorites. Yeah.
I think we're there for at least an hour and a half. And it was just one of those moments where so There was a couple of hikers we were seeing on the trails who we kind of like gotten familiar with, but there was actually a decent amount of people up there, and it seemed like this was the kind of place where people from like the towns below would actually do like a day hike up to here.
Absolutely.
And they come back down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of like this really nice experience to sit there, have a beer or two. You're looking out over this massive glacial valley. You see the Trion Glacier in the background. And just around you, you just hear the bells on the necks of these cows just going off the entire time.
Yep, that's right. I forgot about the bells. Yeah. Bing, bing,
yep.
Bing, 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 bing.
I also believe that this was another scenario where I went into the place and had to use my horrible French to try to communicate, because we were starting to get away from places where English was spoken at this point.
Well, it's important to remember that on the tour, okay, French is considered the language no matter what country you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you're also in Italy. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Italian is, but the idea is that French is kind of not English.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not a lot of English speaking people on the trail, a decent number, but not a lot compared. It's the French and the Italians and the Swiss. And they basically, since you're in northern Italy and then in Switzerland, French is the language. Okay. That's being used. Yep.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate for me.
And me too. With my like elementary style French. But yeah, no, I think that's still, like, looking back when I think about the Tour du Mont Blanc, that moment sitting there with those beers, just looking over the valley was beautiful. I think one of like the more precious moments to me.
I was sitting there with you. It was comfortable. We'd had a good hike. It wasn't one of these ones where you're quite scrambling to the top, throwing your body across the top. I'm done.
Yeah.
We had days like that. Okay, well, I'm done. And yes, come get my body with a helicopter. We're out of here.
Yeah.
But this was just so relaxing, and it was an easy hike up. A couple, there's a couple of cents, but nothing bad at all compared to other things. And then the trip down was going to be nice too. And we did spend a decent amount of time there. It was not hot. It was cool. There was a nice breeze. The place was shaded. They had these big picnic tables outside, or big tables outside. And there was all sorts of people there, some of which we've been kind of like passing throughout the day. Like leapfrogging past them and everything. So it was
there was about 3 groups of people who we kept leapfrogging with. There was the father and his daughter.
Yep.
Who were American, I believe, or Canadian.
Yep.
There was 2 Dutch women.
Yep.
Very nice. We did not speak any similar languages whatsoever between the 2 of us.
No, we just kept smiling at each other. We passed them and we go, bonjour. It didn't make any difference. It's like, midnight, whatever.
Yeah. And then there was the musician couple that we also hiked around.
I forgot about them. They were a lot of fun. Yeah. They were on their honeymoon. Was it their honeymoon? I think
it was their honeymoon. I think they just got married. Yeah.
Yeah. Or not their honeymoon, but they were doing something. Yeah. They were a lot of fun too. They were really nice. And you kind of leapfrog through these people. You're not always staying at the same place with them. So you kind of lose them if they go to a different town than you do, but you kind of pick up these groups that, like, a day or two, you kind of like leapfrog through and you spend breaks with them. You never really get to know them really closely. Some of the places you could have dinner when it was more family style and not, not a town. If you end up in a lot of the B&Bs, it was like long tables and you sit alongside them and chat about how the day went. That was a nice part of that trail. Actually, something else I didn't expect was the amount of interaction with hikers. Our experience in hiking around where we're from is that, you hike and you don't really talk a lot to other people, Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember coming out from La Bovine, and I remember there was this one of my favorite views, and I was actually looking at the guidebook about this. It was actually called the Colle Potalo. I don't know what that means, but it's like this moment where you're just about to hit the tree line again. You're kind of like up on the top of these pastures, and you turn around and you just see that little Alp Bovine sitting right there, kind of nestled against the mountains, and just seeing the scale of the mountains around it.
Yeah.
I remember that as being like, and you're just sitting there in this beautiful meadow, and you're just kind of like struck by like the awe of these mountains, by how small it makes something look. And I don't know, that was one of my favorite views of the entire trail too. And I remember just feeling so, talking about what makes a great day on the trail, so energized with that. Kind of coming down through the pines on this long ascent, which took like 2 or 3 hours.
It did.
And just kind of like being this place where you're listening to the birds and the trees. You have like this nice soft breeze blowing through with the weather, and just kind of like being like your own head, but like in a happy headspace the entire walk down. I remember.
Yeah.
Even for you, Dad, and descents are hard for you. I remember you saying that descent was pretty nice for you.
This was, yes, this was not a bad descent. It wasn't that steep. It wasn't I mean, some areas were. I mean, you are dealing with stuff on the side of a mountain and stuff. Some areas, but most of it wasn't ridiculously. It wasn't rock hopping,
Yeah.
So there was more walking. You hit areas where you were, it was a little steep and stuff, but that's a trail. But it wasn't 2 miles of rock hopping, and which we'll talk a little bit more about in Scotland. Okay.
Yeah.
about rock hopping and want to walk. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then we'll at some point get to Ireland, which was that was fun. But this was pretty easy. And then you start to pass. Remember, we actually passed by Trion, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And you kind of circle around and come back into it. So you're kind of looking down at it from a decent height in the beginning. I mean, easily a couple 100 feet above it,
Yeah, and Trion just like give you like an idea of what this town is like. And this is, I think, our favorite town on the entire trail.
It was, absolutely. Yep.
And we were in everything from like tiny hamlets of like 2 buildings to like decent sized cities like Courmayeur and Chamonix. But Trion was like, I actually looked it up online. It's only 150 people. If you think about the quintessential tiny Swiss town, picturesque, up there in the mountains, This is Trion. It is something out of a postcard.
It was. I have so many photos just of the town. Sometimes I took in black and white. They're my favorite photos.
That is really distinctive pink church, remember?
Yes.
Bright pink church, like right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it had a church. But the thing was, there wasn't a lot of houses there. And there was only a small road, but there were these 2 basically hotels.
Yeah.
And a couple, I mean, there's a couple of times, but it wasn't, you calling it a hamlet. I guess that's a good term for it. But I mean, it really just was almost like a waypoint.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. It was just, you walk into this, you come down this valley and you're following this stream at one point, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, it's breathtaking. You come in, this is what you expected to see a Swiss, but we're right on the edge here. Okay. At this point, but it was just what you expected a Swiss Alps town to look like.
Yeah.
Everything about it.
2 hotels. They kind of face each other.
Yep. And
like half the hikers were in one, half the hikers were in the other. And I remember walking in. It's like, this is one of the few where we had like a shared bathroom. I remember walking into the room. And it's like very Spartan. There's like 2 beds with white sheets on it. Remember?
Yes.
And like no furniture in there.
But at that point, we actually didn't care. No. So, the first couple of things you're like, oh, how can I stay in a room? And trust me, as you begin to do these, you walk in and go bed, shower, bar, we're good. Okay.
But I think, like ending this great day, I remember there was like a little outside bar to the hotel. And we sat there and we had these 2, I forget what the beer of choice there was.
It was Carlsberg there.
Was it Carlsberg? Yeah.
I think it was.
And just having like these 2 giant steins of Carlsberg and just sitting there with the evening kind of like casting like really soft shadows over the mountains, and just kind of like sitting there and kind of just sitting there and reflecting on just a great day of hiking. This was one of my favorite memories too. And I kind of want to circle back around that because, when we're talking about what makes a great hike, what are some of like the things that come to your mind, whether it's this day or other days, that really makes one of those perfect days happen?
Well, I mean, I think there's always the environmental stuff. I mean, but the
weather helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, weather does help, but I don't know. I don't think that that's a qualifier. I don't think things have to be beautiful. We've had rainy, drizzly days in Scotland that were amazing. And I think it's more of a mindset. It's where things start to come together. You're relaxed. You're not. It's not. I mean, you're not challenging yourself to where it's painful or anything like that. And usually those days that happen a couple of days into the trail, even though we've done these several times, those first couple of days are always a little bit more tense. You're still in the American mode of, we must get here. We must do that. And I think that really what it was it was just relaxed. We had times of just laughing. Okay. I mean, obviously, you and the bull and, and the cowbells, I forgot about those. We kept laughing about cowbells. We're going to be hearing cowbells in our sleep tonight, and then, I mean, in Scotland, in Ireland, it was the multicolored sheep, which we'll get to some other point. I mean, there's always the points where you're laughing, you're having a good time. We weren't in a rush. This was not a brutal day where we knew we had to like really push, it was It was a decent day. I can't remember how long it was exactly. I mean, but like I said, at that point, you're just kind of walking through, and and then sitting up top having a beer with you, and then in this little garden area down this beautiful little town. I don't know. It just seemed almost timeless, and that to me makes a good day. The weather helps, the terrain helps, obviously. Okay, especially if you're in your 50s, obviously. But with at that point, no good knees. But really, I think there was just everything just kind of came together. I don't even know what it was. I keep coming back to that day in Mont Blanc on the tour.
And I really think that it's important to realize that these days also, like, these are the days where, the hard days on the trail, which we'll be talking about soon, these days make it worth it. And when you look back on the trail, you think of the hard days and the challenges sometimes, but a lot of the times you look back on these moments, and those moments could be really, really small things. It can be, facing down a bull on the meadows, but it can also be sitting there and having a beer at this cute little cheese and dairy farm at the top of the mountain. It could be sitting there on an alpine valley having lunch, which is just crackers, really. And I think one of the things that makes a really good day on the trail for me is those days where you really can just savor those little moments.
Yeah.
In a way that's really hard to do. We all live in this fast-paced world, especially in America. We all, have deadlines, and we have jobs, and we have, chores to do. And for me, the great days on the hike are the days where that doesn't matter. The days where you can just appreciate the trail. You can just appreciate the scenery. Where your
we can
muscles
get up and take a walk in the morning. That's what we did. That's what we did.
Exactly.
We took a walk. Right.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about other days that were like this too for me. I'm thinking about the last day of hiking on the loch in Scotland. I'm thinking about some of the days in Ireland when you're hiking along the hilltops as very nice days. But this one was particular because I feel like it also had that sense of peace to it. And I think the best days on the trail are the days where you get that sense of serenity and peace, which is, after all, half the reason we're up there in the first place is for that feeling almost.
It is. It's exactly why we did this, and I think at some days you find it, and it's not going to be a continuous thing that you're always going to sense every day of the trail. There's going to be some tough days. There are going to be some days that are just almost forgetful. We've had days where we've hiked 6 miles in a straight line through farm fields. It seemed fun for a while. And then, I couldn't remember anything about it after a while. You're just kind of walking, but this wasn't it. It was enough of a terrain change. You were broken up by things, it was just nice. And I would encourage people who do these types of trails, and to kind of take a mental photograph sometimes of these days. Okay.
Yeah.
Because this is what makes you go up and go, you guys want to hike Scotland? You're like, yes. Sure. You don't really want to hike 100 miles across Scotland. You want to find more days like this. And we find them in Scotland. We find them in Ireland, and soon we'll find them in Portugal, I'm sure.
Yeah. Kind of come to a close on this episode. There's also a second side to this. And it's a side we're going to talk about next time. And that side is the worst days on the trail.
Just one episode?
We've had some tough days. I have one specifically in mind that we're going to talk about because
we all know what it is too.
When you're talking about the best day on the trail, it's almost made into one of the best days by those worst days. Those worst days, the ones you just have to power through. And we wanted to show you we wanted to start with this, what does a great day on the trail feel like? And also show you what does a hard day on the trail feel like? So, I'm looking forward to that episode for sure, Dad. But is there anything else, from this day that you wanna bring out?
No, I would suggest to people that, we talked about in the first episode a little bit more about, how you get started and what we did and everything. But I think that it comes down to, being in the moment of being on the trail. There's, some, unbelievable writers have written about this, about being on trails and everything. And I'm not going to try to duplicate what they said, but the idea of it was good. I felt as if after that day trip, after we got up in Triant and started to head out the next day, I felt relaxed. And it wasn't because of the accommodations. It wasn't because of the food. It was just because of, even when we talk about the worst days coming up. Okay. And it's not going to be, you got to be able to pull those things out of it. I mean, because
Yeah,
there's some really good things that came out of the worst days. Okay,
yeah,
you know, mostly
exactly.
you survive, which is good. Okay.
Well, it all tells a story, and that's the entire purpose of these. Is you come off with a story too,
Right.
and that story is the good days, but it's also the bad days. And I'm looking forward to us talking about the bad days on the next episode. Well, I think that's all for today. Thank you for listening to the Long Ways podcast. Once again, I'm Devin.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening with us.